Okay, so our closing panel is going to deal with the subject of digital manufacturing and digital innovation. And the focus is going to be on the regional manufacturing hub that the administration has set up in Chicago. And there are innovative companies there that have developed great capacity. And so we're going to delve into some similar terrain that we covered in regard to Youngstown, but also try and draw some broader lessons for other areas as well. So to help us with this topic, we have two distinguished guests. To my immediate right is Carolyn Nowinski. She is the Chief Operating Officer and Interim Executive Director of UI Labs, standing for University Industry Labs. She also serves as the Associate Vice President for Innovation and Economic Development at the labs. In that role, she promotes the strategic relationships between the university community and external stakeholders that are designed to foster technology, commercialization, talent development, and overall economic impact. She was one of the founders of the labs, and she has been named by the Crane Chicago Business as one of the top 40 under 40 list. Mike Russo is the Director of Government Relations for Global Foundries. He is responsible for the strategic plan development and execution to support the business needs, policy development, and lobbying work on behalf of that firm. He works closely with the administration here in DC in an advisory capacity, and he's also leading several initiatives designed to develop nationally scalable platforms in areas that are important to the U.S. economy. And this includes areas such as education and workforce development, the supply chain, and developing a 21st century smart grid. So I'm going to jump in with a question for Carolyn. So tell us about the university role in working with the industry to advance manufacturing innovation. What is UI Labs, and what is it doing to improve manufacturing?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and great to talk about what we're doing in Chicago at the DMDI Institute, and thanks so much to John White and the family for their support of this event. The University of Illinois was one of the drivers in creating UI Labs, which is now an independent nonprofit organization. And it really goes back, I think, nicely to what Jason said in introducing the concept of NNMI. It was trying to figure out a way to harness the great work being done at our research universities in the U.S. with the industrial needs of next generation technologies, in this case specifically in manufacturing. There's been a number of surveys over the last several years that there is the industry generally predicts that they're going to be increasing their investment in R&D. At the same time, there's a recognition that for the majority of those companies, they don't believe they have the internal capacity at their organizations to be able to actually do that type of applied research and development. Looking at another kind of macro trend, we've got, largely speaking, R&D is invested in primarily by industry over other sources. However, less than 6% of that R&D is actually invested in at universities to do industrial research and development. So we've got these disconnects here. Industry says they need these external partners to be able to innovate better, and at the same time, such a minority of investment actually happens within our great research universities. And so in Illinois and in Chicago specifically, there's a recognition that we need to do better at bringing these groups together. And so that, hence, UI Labs was founded to bring together the university talent and technology with industry and be able to create a neutral platform for that type of collaboration. UI Labs is actually designed to be a portfolio of programs, sector agnostic, but very early on in the development, we had realized that advanced manufacturing was indeed going to be our initial area of focus. And for a variety of reasons, which we might go into in today's conversation, digital manufacturing specifically. So when we learned of the administration's intent to establish a digital manufacturing institute, we were already off to the races in bringing university and industry together. And so we were fortunate to be able to pull together our application and fortunate enough to win.
And what is digital manufacturing?
That's a great question. Probably the question we get asked the most. And there's all sorts of answers, but I'll tell
Wait a
you.
minute. I thought this was a unique question for me.
I'll tell you how we are learning to describe it better. It's about the application of both data and the tools to process it to be able to make better decisions. So one of the reasons that we believe that the Chicagoland area was primed to be able to do this is to be able to harness some of the high-performance computing power that's resident at the University of Illinois, at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, as well as at Argonne National Labs, and a number of other supercomputers in the region, where we can now have the tools to be able to process that data, because that's what was missing. It's not that manufacturing and data, or the data is new to manufacturing. It's that now we actually have the tools to be able to use that data, turn it into information, and then use that information to make better decisions that therefore improve the productivity of our manufacturing companies. And that application of that data is what digital manufacturing is.
Okay, so Mike, Global Foundries is not located in Chicago. It actually is based outside Albany, New York. But your company is one of the leaders in terms of the semiconductor field. You do a lot in terms of digital manufacturing and digital design. So, what is your company doing, and how can that be a guide to how we can do a better job in manufacturing?
Yeah, well, we're actually the nation's largest semiconductor foundry, so we're basically a contract chip maker. We're number 2 in the world. We have a global footprint, but our asset in the U.S. is based in upstate New York, and we're in the process of constructing and ramping the most advanced semiconductor foundry fab in the world there. And that is our advanced fab. In other words, the technologies that we produce there are most advanced. That represents about a $10 billion investment. It could be many more times that. So first of all, I want to thank the administration for their keen focus in this area, and Jason Miller basically covered the bases from our perspective. They're doing a great job within the realms of what they can do within the administration. The focus that they have on manufacturing, and when you say manufacturing, it's not just Global Foundries, arguably like the most advanced of advanced manufacturers, but the entire supply chain is very, very important. From our perspective, to your question, Daryl, how is that relevant? When you lose manufacturing to the degree that Jason referred to earlier, some could argue change policy, get manufacturing back. It's not that simple because you lose supply chain. And Global Foundries, when we talk about a 5 to 6 to 1 spin-off as far as jobs, they're higher value jobs. We're pumping about, we're not even fully ramped, it's about $350 million in annual payroll to that, within that region. But it's really about all the other connected supply chains that affect not only the processes in Global Foundries and what we do and what we produce, but it's also those connected to all the economic activities related to employees. So the supply chain is really much bigger. So what we're doing in leading and learning and contributing really has a lot to do with supply chain development. How do you use digital capabilities to truly integrate the supply chain? And when I say the supply chain, let's call it the manufacturing community. And basically, it's the entire spectrum of those involved from one end to the other. And supply chain, that's including workforce development. That's including early on in design processes, manufacturing, operations, facilities. When you talk about a clean room, for example, you're talking to a government relation. I'm a political scientist, right? From the Lincoln Logs era, so it's kind of funny to be in this position. But when you talk about that, when you just talk about HV, the people that are responsible for air and water into a factory, they think, geez, it's a factory. Well, just can you imagine a clean room bigger than 6 football fields with the air that's in the main part of the room 10,000 times cleaner than the cleanest operating suite and 100,000 times cleaner than in the tool space, and moving that air in and out every 3 minutes. That facility has to talk to manufacturing. And think about the supply chain not only related to what we produce, but the supply chain to do with parts to keep the clean room operating, right? So that continuum and connectivity and using real-time data to be not just where you need to be, but ahead of the curve is so, so important. And we say ahead of the curve, and when I say supply chain, we're a large manufacturer. Some people look at us as like we're not the end user of the supply chain, it's the customer. So being ahead of markets, understanding how you enable what the customers need you to enable, and have a continuous feedback loop so there's continuous improvement in real time, that is really at the heart of what we do in our fab, and that is what will make the U.S., at least in my view, globally competitive and a leader in innovation for decades and decades to come. I would also argue that if we lose that capability, if we don't focus, at jeopardy is not only our economic security, but our national security. You know, you have to lead in innovation. So to your point, Daryl, really, you know, some people say, why would you invest $10 million in the U.S. to do this type of activity? There's certain things that we offer here and have in the U.S. Rule of law, the ability to protect IP and supply chain security, our university collaborations, our ability to congregate in hubs, through, for example, the NNMI. We really have some great tools to work with. So the question would be, how can we all collaborate, including the global foundries of the world, to really completely leverage those assets?
And I know in New York you've worked closely with a community college that is close to your factory. Could you describe that relationship and what it adds to you, and also how you being there has affected it?
Yeah, it's really much deeper than even that one community college you're referring to. We have a close collaboration with 6 regional community colleges, but more so the entire State University of New York system, which is 30 community colleges and 64, including universities and community colleges. And we're actually leading the nation's largest education initiative of its type, which encompasses 13 counties, 111 school districts, and 345 schools. To really scale best practices, most innovative practices in education today, and develop a scalable platform that can be used nationally. So we're doing a lot of work. But as related to the one, I think you're probably referring to Hudson Valley Community College, but there's several others that we're partnering very closely. It's how can we, Jason mentioned earlier how we're losing hands-on skills. Shop classes are disappearing. Kids don't work with their hands at a young age, you know. And that's very true. So leveraging community colleges, trade schools, helping them develop programs that bring project-based learning, experiential learning, you know, into the education environments to ensure that it's demand-driven is very, very important. It's not only important to a global foundries, but it's important to our country. So what can we do to innovate in that space and then scale those practices? And we're doing a lot of work with the education system and that community college in particular there in upstate New York.
And Carolyn, how are you working with the local colleges and universities in the Chicago area?
Well, so it's actually much bigger than even just Chicago. I mean, we, as the nature of these institutes, we're the national hub for digital manufacturing. And so while there is definitely a regional concentration in the Midwest, we really see this as a national resource. And so we have partners as far away as Oregon to the west, and New York to the east, and down to Texas, and up to Michigan and Wisconsin. So we really do see this as collaboration broadly and bringing in all the different players. Certainly that's been the theme, I think, of all the discussion so far today. And the community colleges, vocational schools, the high schools, the technical high schools in particular, there's a great role that they absolutely have to be at the table because we need to be able to advance those skill sets. So for us, you know, one of the probably the most the largest portion of our budget and any of the budgets for these manufacturing innovation institutes is applied research and development. I mean, we're in the business of funding new translation of R&D. And so in doing that, as we fund our projects, we actually just launched our first project call last week. Yesterday in Chicago, we hosted our first Proposers Day to talk about the first 2 sets of project types that we're going to be funding, deploying about $10 million to those across those projects. And the way that we do some of the selection process actually is based upon what is that plan for workforce development and training. How are you bringing in those types of partners? I mean, there's all sorts of other criteria, but that is a very important one for us to make sure that those institutions are at the table and part of those project teams so that there is a plan from the beginning about what those on-ramps are for the workers and for the skill sets that we need to make sure that we can actually use those technologies in the workplace.
And what are the two projects that you're specifically focusing on now?
So the first set of projects that we announced were transitioning some of the technologies coming out of a program that DARPA had been funding. There's about a $200 million investment into a program called Adaptive Vehicle Make. A number of the companies and universities that were part of that initial DARPA funding, so that's, as Mike talked about earlier, the early TRL levels, 1 through 3. There's now technologies at the point where they've got to move from 4 through 7. And so we're going to be that transition partner to move them across that gap. So we're fortunate after the initial $70 million that the government invested into our institute, there was an additional $10 million that was awarded to us last month to specifically focus on this technology transition. So that was our first project call. So we have two different types of projects we're going to be funding. One is of those technologies coming out of this AVM program that have that technology proof of concept in the in the lab so they're mature enough to be able to be moved to the marketplace, to a commercial proof of concept. We'll be funding about $6 million worth of projects in that area, and then the balance will be funded in some of those technologies that are maybe still a little bit immature, but have great potential, and that there's industry around the table saying these are important technologies and we want to advance them. One of the keys to these projects that we fund will be making sure that all these various collaborators are involved in it and that they're contributing a one-to-one match in funding these projects. So they're really putting skin in the game here to say, this is important. We are your customers. So industry is saying, we are your future customers for this. The community colleges are saying, we are the future skills developers, skills trainers. And the universities are gaining the benefit of being able to take their expertise and help drive these technologies out of the lab and into the marketplace.
But when you have multiple partners involved in developing products, how do you handle the intellectual property component?
That is.
Sounds like this could be a nightmare.
Yeah. So it's this is definitely the hot topic, and I think Ed framed it nicely in the last discussion about how America Makes is looking at intellectual property, and so we too have tried to adopt best practices. One of the benefits of having a national network of these institutes is that we can share best practices. We can learn from some of the work being done, for example, in Germany and France and in Italy and some of the other manufacturing investments that have been made there, but we can, most importantly, learn from each other in the U.S., and so we don't have to be recreating the wheel every time. That's actually the model of UI Labs, is that with each program we get better and we get smarter about how do we create these frameworks, and intellectual property is definitely the trickiest of them. So the way that we look at it is that we've got 3 guiding principles that we established during our proposal development process, and then each individual project proposal has to include its own IP management plan, similar to how America Makes does it, to really empower the project teams to be able to determine how that technology be commercialized. But the 3 guiding principles, I think, are really important, and this is what we heard from our prospective members during the partnership process. And we've got companies, large companies like GE and Procter & Gamble, to small family-owned businesses, just outside of Southern Illinois. So we've got such a range of companies, and how do we make sure that this is relative to them? So briefly, the 3 guiding principles are, we're going to have to be collaborative about bringing background IP to the table. There's going to be projects that are going to require pre-existing IP, and we want to bring it to the table and allow the projects to be able to build on top of them. But at the end of the day, we also assure you that we're going to figure out ways to protect that background intellectual property as well, so that when you're bringing something to the table, you know that there's processes and procedures in place to protect it. The second thing is that this is about commercialization. This is about making American companies more competitive, and so there has to be a plan for licensing or for ownership that's really commercially driven. And so there are certain benefits that our members get based on the tier of membership. We have a slightly broader set of tiers. The cheapest tier is about $500 to get in, and the largest is $400,000 a year. And depending on where you fall in line as a member, there's certain rights and privileges that are available to you. Most important is being able to use those technologies internally to be able to improve your business processes. But we also want to make sure that there are the commercialization opportunities on an exclusive basis too. So we have to understand that there's a plan to do that. And then the third component of our guiding principles is that we're trying to create sustainable institutes here. One of the things that, and Jason mentioned this earlier, this is seed money to catalyze a public-private partnership. But the government is going to transition from investor to customer over the 5 years of these initial institutes, so that we need to be prepared. The institute, the members of it, need to be prepared that after 5 years, the government funding in terms of seed investor goes away, and we need to maintain our sustainability. And so part of our IP business model is also ensuring that there is a return to the institute to help sustain it, to be able to allow us to use that intellectual property to train workers, for example, and be able to show small and mid-sized enterprises how to use those technologies.
So Mike, one of the impressive things that Global Foundries has done is demonstrated that America can still build products and do innovative design. And when Jason was here, he talked about the challenge of rebuilding manufacturing, specifically looking at the supply chain thing. And he mentioned that sometimes you can do the manufacturing, but it's hard to rebuild all the elements of the supply chain. So you've been doing that. What's been the secret of your success? How have you managed the supply chain part of manufacturing?
It's really, you have to be proactive. You have to reach out early on. You have to understand where the assets are, do due diligence early on so you understand supply chain capabilities, where gaps are. And you really are, as a larger manufacturer, you really have to understand that you do have a role to play in developing the supply chain. You have to be proactive. And if there's gaps in the supply chain that need to be filled, if there's suppliers that need to be picked up, if you need to help ensure that SMEs, small and mid-sized manufacturers, have access to product and process innovation, you need to be very active and proactive in doing that. It's one of the reasons why we're excited about the NNMI and the focused on creating regional hubs that are focused, is that if you're a small and mid-sized manufacturer today, you're just worried about keeping the lights on. You might have one product or process that you sell, and you don't have time to necessarily invest in being proactive and understanding which way the ball is moving. You might be a long-standing manufacturer that has not had the money to reinvest, and your roof is leaking. So having a collaborative environment with the entire manufacturing community that helps to develop the necessary workforce, that helps provide a safe harbor for those SMEs to be able to really get some questions answered and be involved in that manufacturing ecosystem, so they can fill the gaps that would otherwise exist. Very, very important and really very exciting. And I think, to Carolyn's point, I think we all need to really fully leverage those. I look at the NNMIs just in general. Are they the answer to the economic problems of the country? No. Are they going to, in and of themselves, create hundreds of thousands of jobs and turn around the economy? No. So for those that take shots at the NNMIs because that's not it, then that's not the purpose. That's never going to happen. However, they're jewels, and there are seeds that are being planted by the administration, and they're an enabling device, if you will, to really bring in the complete supply chain, and more than a supply chain, but the entire manufacturing community, to leverage the collective strength to be able to get somewhere that we would otherwise not be able to get. And when you talk about global competitiveness and the need to really anchor manufacturing as a key driver in national economic security, the NNMI concept is very, very important. And I think what you'll see moving forward are even more ways to broaden the tent to encourage others that might not have been directly involved in like winning, I hate the terms winning and losing, but winning applications, but broaden the tent so other regional collaborators and national collaborators can use that foundation to really fully leverage it. And that's going to be key as we transition. Carolyn mentioned currently the NMIs are funded solely, seed funding is provided solely by the administration, and that was not the original design. So some of the handcuffs that are felt there are that the focus has to fit within the budgets that are doing the funding. So for example, if DOD is funding something, it's got to fit a DOD mission. If DOE is funding something, it's got to fit within a DOE mission. That's not the fault of the administration. It's really a product of not having congressional funding. So as we move forward, and it's exciting to hear that both sides of the aisle, I'm excited to hear whenever there's agreement on anything anymore, and both sides of the aisle get the importance of manufacturing. People now understand that the country will not survive on just a service economy. And so I'm hopeful that there will be funding for additional centers, and I think that once the toe is in the water, there's going to be more excitement in Congress, more excitement by the private sector, and ultimately we will be able to transition it to the model that Carolyn referred to, and it will be really a great asset for the country in moving forward.
So we're going to see other institutes, but what about the sustainability of yours and the other ones that already have been established?
I think the sustainability is going to come in us showing that there's a return on investment to our members. I mean, at the end of the day, even though we're technically a charitable organization, a 501c3, this isn't charity. We've been very clear about that, and our members have been very clear to us back on that topic, which is we've got to demonstrate there's a return, and when we do that, that allows us the opportunity to continue to benefit from their investment into not only membership, but into the projects, to be able to bring more investment dollars and be able to leverage each other's dollars. And I think that ultimately becomes a large component of the sustainability. But there's also a number of other factors that can lead to that. The entrepreneurial ecosystem that was talked about a little bit earlier also is, I think, a great opportunity for sustainability. When you start creating an increased cluster of like-minded companies and individuals who are about advancing a particular technology, I mean, there's great investment that can come from those types of ventures, and also in just delivering some of the services. The institutes themselves will become, best practice hubs in particular domains. So whether that means from a training perspective or from consulting perspective, standards perspective, I think there's a number of opportunities, and we'll see over the next 5 years how the institutes, and we'll learn from each other and understand how the institutes are going to be able to benefit from providing those types of services. We provide value to the supply chain, to the manufacturing community, then I think sustainability becomes inevitable.
So just one more question, then I'm going to open the floor to questions from the audience. So how much collaboration is there across the 4 institutes? You, Youngstown, Detroit, Raleigh.
So Youngstown is the longest in existence, and the other 3 have all been awarded this year. So,
but what the hell have you been doing this year? That's my question.
And in fact, actually, Ed and I were just talking about this earlier today. There was the first convening of the 4 institutes just happened. There's a second one already planned, and so there is this growing network excitement and an opportunity about potentially working together and learning from one another, picking each other's brains on the kinds of requests. I think management of our time and resources is something that I would say all of us face, and learning from each other is going to be key. I think over time we're going to be able to understand also better how the members of each of those institutes can interact with one another, and I know that's an ongoing topic within the administration, within the AMP 2.0, the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership Group, because there is great opportunity for collaboration across the institutes. Just a quick anecdote on some of the, kind of echoing the points that Mike made earlier on the supply chain. The digitally connecting the supply chain is core to our mission. It's core to the innovation, the key innovation that we're looking to build, a digital manufacturing commons that literally links this community in a virtual fashion, and it allows that interoperability and sharing of data and usage of data. But we've got companies that are at the table. I mentioned earlier, just as an example, GE and P&G, others, Siemens and Dow and Rolls-Royce and others, who are at the cutting edge of using digital technologies within their manufacturing floors. So why are they paying these membership fees to be a part of this? And it's to be able to ensure that the capabilities and the skills get reached down into their supply chain. They're investors because of the supply chain opportunities and closing that gap and making sure that a more capable supply chain makes better business for them as well. And so I think as this network grows, there's going to be increased opportunities for connecting the supply chains of the companies that are part of those networks.
Okay, questions from the audience. Over here. If you can pass the microphone down the road.
Jim Sang, question for Mike on scale of hubs. It's my impression that your hub is actually related to the investment that Pataki and IBM made in SUNY Albany, which was a $6 billion investment. Am I wrong, or are you part of actually that hub? And so it's rather different from the sort of stuff we're talking about with NMI and things like that.
There's differences and there's similarities. Actually, the hub had its roots back during the first Cuomo administration when then Governor Mario Cuomo and then Speaker Sheldon Silver made the first investment in Albany in nanotechnology. But what's interesting about that environment down there, there's been, I think, 5 governors. Sometimes they go and come quickly in New York. But there's been 5 governors, both sides of the aisle, that have stayed the course on investing on what they saw as a strategic initiative or a strategic industry. So that's really where it began. But in essence, what that hub consists of is academia, industry, and government partnering, leveraging the collective asset to do the same thing that the NNMIs are doing. So no, it's not an NNMI, but there are a lot of similarities, and not the least of which is that common investment between, in that case it was the state government, not the federal government, but that investment initially, that seed investment was key. Even when it comes to global foundries, there was some investment by the state government early on to help to level the playing field with the rest of the country. But if you look at when they do that, you have certain performance metrics that your return on investment. We've blown those out of the water. So it's proven to be very wise investments. So I think that some of the learnings from that are applicable, many of them applicable for the NNMI concepts. And we're doing a lot of sharing with the administration and others so you can pull up best practices and learn from them.
But do you have a number for the total investment New York State has put into?
Not a total investment because it's very wide and broad. It's public and private investments over time. I don't want to, give an inaccurate number, but it's been sizable. They've invested a lot for a number of years. I mean, the first investment was in the early to mid '90s, so there's been a lot of investment. I would like to know the total investment, but also the ROI on that, right?
Antoine. There's a microphone coming over on this side.
I've been intrigued by the Global Foundries project for some time. First of all, because you're owned by Abu Dhabi, but in the end the decision was made not to build a factory in the desert, but to build it near Saratoga in Malta, where you are now. And now it's supposedly being expanded. So the question is, first of all, what drove that decision to build it there? How important was what you were just referring to, what Alain Calliers is doing at the College of Nanotechnology in Albany? How critical was that for you to take the decision to go there? And the second question is, what supply chain did you find left? Was there any supply chain left?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting when you talk about supply chain, many probably do not know that area was the heart of the Industrial Revolution at one time. And so they were ahead of the curve. I mean, you could trace it back to even arguably, what happened with the Civil War and the outcome of the Civil War because of innovation in horseshoes and horseshoe nails, right, came from there in the foundries there. So you're right, the supply chain was decimated. It's taken a lot of focus over a number of years to rebuild the supply chain. It's a different type of manufacturing that in some cases makes it development of the supply chain easier in that you're bringing in mines and developing mine share versus big, huge, old furnaces and that type. It's a different type of supply chain. But you have to look at the partners you have regionally, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, SUNY, the College of Nanoscale Science and Engineering, our proximity to other universities there in the Northeast. There's a lot of good mind share that takes place there. And it is a snowball effect as people begin to invest. If you go back beginning in the 2000s, and if you look at like the CNSC and the amount of activity that was going on there then, versus what has happened there and in the region since someone said, look, we are going to invest and build a big, that's where you commercialize, you know, that's, R&D is one thing, but you could take that and go anywhere, but now we're actually going to make things with it, right? Look at what's happened in that region. So when you asked the question, why did we decide to locate there? I like to kid with some of the politicians as they stand up and take credit for it. I say, take credit for this. It's actually the turf that we sit on within Luther Forest Technology Campus. It's an old glacial deposit ground. The sand is over 300 feet deep. So let me see a politician take credit for the geographic stability, from a seismic standpoint, you can't have any vibration, especially when it's an advanced fab like this. But more importantly, it's the willingness for the community to collaborate and to develop the necessary workforce, to work collaboratively and develop curriculum that makes sense. There's a university side, R&D, the work that we have on the manufacturing technology piece with RPI in data analytics, et cetera. When you look at the state and the county and the towns reaching out then and saying, what can we do? We're not going to wait to develop the infrastructure, big infrastructure, power, water, gas. They said, we're going to find out what something like you would build would need, and we're going to have it there ready for you. Then you can make the decision. So they really went out on a limb to bring in big power, big water, big gas to a region that didn't exist before. So that was very, very courageous, very, very important. So really, it's education, it's the a regional economy and ability to support a fab and willingness to develop the infrastructure, and then the partnerships when it comes to university collaboration.
You have a follow-up?
Sorry, I can't resist following up with one question. How important is what you are doing and what they're doing in Albany to really bring back the leading edge in semiconductors from Korea, Taiwan, Japan to some extent, back to the US?
Mm-hmm. I think it's very important, but I don't want to say all important, because from a policy perspective and a continued collaboration perspective, it is possible for the grapes to dry up on the vine. I think that we're moving the ball in the right direction. I think that we've made a lot of really good decisions collaboratively from a nation, state, and regional economy. The focus is there, but we have to have continued focus and diligence when it comes to continuing to develop the necessary workforce, the necessary supply chain. Let me take a second out when it comes to workforce. We're talking about, we'll bring it right back around to the actual topic that we're on right now. If you can imagine the amount of technology, we could produce currently 60,000 wafers per month. Wafers are 300 millimeter, they're about the size of a record album. Hundreds, if not thousands, of chips on a wafer. We're working with technologies now, developing technologies. The width of a feature size is how much it takes a human fingernail to grow in 5 seconds. Subatomic. Think of the amount of data that we generate just within our walls to do with the production of a wafer, design and production. Then think about the facilities operation. Then think about the integration of the supply chain. Think about the role of IT, and then securing it all. It's mind-boggling. Again, maybe it's just mind-boggling. I might be the only one in the room that's mind-boggling being a political scientist. I don't know. But it's pretty impressive. But how about the workforce it's going to take to manage that, to develop that, to stay up on that? We have a huge gap there. Most people focus on the talent that's needed to operate the fab, the technicians, the maintenance capability. You know, there's a gap there too. We don't have enough people to hire. We have to, all hands on deck. We're recruiting from all over the globe and all over the country. Just think of the IT piece, which we don't talk a lot about. How do you collect data, analyze data, use data in real time throughout an integrated supply chain? How do you develop open architectures that are secure but allow for supply chain integration? So from a workforce development perspective, it's much more than building the talent and collaborating with CNSC is not only R&D, by the way, but CNSC also is part of, we have very progressive internship programs that people start in the community college, they get basic fundamentals, then they go through CNSC, and their experience is more from a research perspective and theory perspective, and then they go to the big factory and actually make it, right? So they're very collaborative partners. So back to when they were talking about geographic early on, having close access, both from a e-access, technology access, but really geographic access is very, very important. What we're working on right now is how do you bring some of the supply chain right now is spread out too far when it comes to, in our industry, packaging, testing our wafers and packaging. How can we actually bring that closer as well? So if we're able to do the things we'd like to do in partnership with our regional partners and other national partners, that, in my view, will definitely give us a leg up on some of our global competitors in the rest of the world. It's very hard to replicate what we're doing in upstate New York now in some areas of the world that would like to compete. And I would argue it probably doesn't make sense to try to compete. When it comes to developing countries, don't try to reinvent the wheel and lead in innovation. Partner with the countries that lead in innovation and go after manufacturing and creating large numbers of jobs in segments of manufacturing versus super advanced manufacturing where you can put people to work. So that's a bigger policy discussion between countries, and maybe I'll live long enough to see some of that. I don't know. I don't think we're going to fix it today, though.
Right. Over there, Rick has a question. Behind you, there's a microphone coming up. Yep.
Rick Lampert. Every speaker, if there's a theme, it's the importance of the public-private partnership. And one of you said something quite encouraging, that both sides of the aisle get the importance of manufacturing. But both sides of the aisle today get the importance of lots of things, and nothing happens. In particular, in this area, you hear from both the left and right condemnation of corporate welfare, as they call it. You see the troubles of the Export-Import Bank. You see, again, the notion that the government should not pick winners and losers, which these competitions seem to do. So could you discuss a bit more about the political situation today and the political challenges that we face if we're going to keep up the kind of innovative public-private partnerships with the federal government playing an important role?
I think that's probably directed to me. Maybe it's you, Carolyn. What do you think?
Feel free to take
All right.
it. I'll jump in.
A political question. You'll bail me out if I get to you. There are definitely challenges, and I don't think it pays to go into a deep dive on what's happening here in our democracy and why there is the gridlock there is. So some are quick to say that it took a couple thousand years for Rome to show some cracks, and we're only a couple hundred years down the road, so what are we going to do about it? So I have faith in our democracy. I think over time things will level out. Sometimes it's hard to believe that common sense will prevail. The thing that I think is encouraging is arguably, I'm close to 60 years old, and in my lifetime, I can honestly say that I haven't seen the degree of gridlock that we have today. And it bears itself out on numbers of bills that actually get passed in our total Congress. But what I think is encouraging is that the administration, and I think that in administrations to come that are faced with that, have to get really, they have to use a little ingenuity on how to move the ball forward. And what I've seen with this administration is a willingness to reach out to the private sector and not just say, will you advise, but this is the answer I want you to come up with, which is not unusual in Washington, but rather say, we're not going to give you the answer. We're going to facilitate. We're going to give you what you need to meet, to convene, but we really want to hear from the private sector on what needs to happen and what the priorities should be. When you take our economy the way it works and you engage the private sector, small manufacturers, startups, mid-sized manufacturers, long-standing manufacturers, education, all the folks involved in when I say manufacturing community, it's the people that sell shoes. People don't understand what manufacturing community is. It's everybody along the continuum. And you reach out and you say, what do we need to do? And then all those people in their communities, they vote. They talk to others that vote. It's actually like a start of a movement where people, when you're at your kitchen table, you don't say, am I a Republican or am I a Democrat? You think about what does it take to get a job and put food on the table and to have a safety for your children or whoever. And I think that engaging the private sector in constructive dialogue is the beginning of a way of doing business that will ultimately translate to a more proactive, or more, not a proactive, but a more active community when it comes to engaging through the elective process, the electorate. So I think that it's not going to happen overnight. I think it's a change in how we operate. I think ultimately, with people's focus on things that are important to them, it's going to come around. It's going to eventually get Congress back to the middle. So I know, coming from a political science, like, how, if you're good at what you do, how could you be saying that? It's like, I'm saying there's hope. It's not going to happen overnight.
So, Carol Ann, aside from the political aspects, Mike has given us some indication of the lessons he's drawn about, how to drive success in this area. And even though you've only been in operation a few months, do you have any preliminary lessons that you think other communities or other projects could benefit from?
Well, I'd say awareness and engagement is key. I think that's what allowed us to be able to form the type of consortium we did. And, I think touching even on just the question that was just asked and, kind of pulling the policy away from it, these companies have a lot of choices about how to invest their dollars. And there's a lot, particularly the larger companies that have global footprints. And when there are foreign governments making huge investments in leveraging R&D from the private sector, there's a choice to be made. And we frankly faced discussions with our partners early on in forming the consortium of, why should I choose to make this type of investment here? Why with you guys versus another country, another institute? And I think that keeping that dialogue going and that awareness and engagement piece was absolutely critical. And it was across so many different ranges of stakeholders. And so as other communities are thinking about how to put this together, I'll say we absolutely had missteps along the way in terms of communicating. You can always communicate better, but I think it's one of the things I think I'm very proud of about our team is how we got the message out there and how we engaged folks. And shortly after we received the award, we did a series of road shows. We're continuing them with communities across Illinois, across Chicagoland, and even the broader Midwest, to talk to small and mid-sized companies, to talk to the workers, the community colleges, and say, how can we better tell you what we're trying to do, and how can we engage you in that process? And I think that's going to continue over time. But I think the fact that the administration has pushed this forward, the fact there is bipartisan support of this, goes to show that this is a conversation that needs to happen. Because if just getting the awareness that if we lose manufacturing innovation, our competitiveness as a nation is deeply threatened. I think the conversation is happening now, and it's happening on both sides of the aisle, and awareness and engagement will be key.
Okay, right there on the aisle, there's a. Yeah, if we can, yeah.
Hi, Zoe Lippman from Blue Green Alliance. I wanted to ask a question about a different divide, not the partisan one. I absolutely support what was said earlier about when we talk about advanced manufacturing today, we're really talking about the state of manufacturing today. We're not in a traditional, what is a historic view of manufacturing. But I think the areas that both of you are in touch on a divide that's conceptual and I think also pragmatic in the manufacturing sector between, say, Silicon Valley and the Allegheny or Cuyahoga valleys. Can you talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot today about manufacturing really engaging in the digital sphere and the thinking creatively. How has the traditional tech industry reached out to the manufacturing sector, and how is that communication, that cultural conversation going?
I'll take a start at that. I've spent really the majority of my career in Chicago, where 10 years ago it was, how can we be more like Silicon Valley? Because we've got great research universities, great companies, no venture capital, what's going on? And I think it's been very interesting to me to be able to watch that evolution of that conversation where we're no longer trying to be like another place, but rather create our own ecosystem. And I think that's what some of the traditional tech hubs really have had, is a robust ecosystem that brings together the broader community. There's not just one solution to the challenge of innovation and entrepreneurship and local investment. So, more venture capital, more entrepreneurs, better universities, more research dollars, more proactive government. I mean, there's always like, oh, that's the silver bullet question, and there just isn't one. It's about bringing the ecosystem together. And so as we think about how do we create that ecosystem in and around Chicago as a Midwest hub, but again, Midwest economic hub, but looking at the great communities and local economies within the region, we're trying to pull it together virtually, but also create a sense of placemaking. I think it's a big part of our mission in developing that ecosystem where there's a place for the community to go. It starts with the hub we're building in Chicago, which will be open early next year. But we also, as part of our practice, will be leveraging local hubs across the Midwest and ultimately, hopefully, even beyond that. And each of those, I think, goes to that ecosystem approach, so that when there's a great technology coming out of one of our research universities that is looking for an entrepreneur to take it to the next level, or looking for an industrial customer, whether that's a big company or a small company, they don't have to go to the valley to find that. You can find that in your backyard, and that's what those regional clusters start enabling.
I take a little bit different approach on that. One of the big growth markets today is in manufacturing technology and automation, and bringing technology that we produce to the manufacturers. PLCs are pretty much in everything, even in your home today. And as we get into the Internet of Things, I used to think I didn't want to live too old. I want to be physically there and mentally there, and then go out. I'd like to be kind of frozen in time right now and come back 1,000 years from now and see what it looks like, because it's really crazy. But we are really contributing to manufacture when it comes to bringing technology into those more, some of the more standard forms of manufacturing. If you look at those factories now as compared to 50 years ago, there's been a big change. It's not only safety, it's efficiency, it's process and product innovation. I'm just talking about global foundries now. We see that as a growth market, and we're really contributing heavily to bringing technology to manufacturing.
Right here.
Yeah, I'm Brian Paul from the Advanced Manufacturing National Program Office. Carolyn, this question's for you. I'm interested in the development of UI labs, kind of how that all got started. Where did the leadership for that come from? I mean, was it state? Was it university? Was it the industry? How did that come about?
Thanks for the question. So the conversation around UI Labs, before it even had a name, actually started in late 2011, and there's really a confluence of multiple things happening at the same time. There was a recognition by the University of Illinois, which is where I was at the time, that in the top 5 engineering and computer science program there, and graduating more engineers and computer scientists than several of the other top programs combined. And yet we have this complaint in the region that there's not enough engineers or not enough computer scientists. And we say, well, part of our economic development land grant mission is we've got an obligation to make sure that our graduates are staying here. And we're having an opportunity to really embrace that talent. At the same time that was going on, the mayor in the city of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, was newly in office and really challenged the research universities locally to say, we've got to keep our engineering talent here, and we've got great technologies coming out of our universities, and they can't keep going off to the coast to get commercialized. We've got to keep them. There was also a national debate. The National Academies published a report mid-2012 that talked about the fact that we've lost great institutions like Bell Labs, where you broke down the silos between different stakeholders, and so the UI Labs was founded on this principle that we needed a neutral platform to bring all of these different groups together. The University of Illinois chairman, Chris Kennedy, has a saying that universities are the greatest renewable asset or the renewable source of economic development in our region. So that means they produce such great resources and technology and talent, and how do we embrace that, and how do we use it for economic development? And so we actually set up UI Labs prior to this, and we started exploring digital manufacturing based on a pilot that had been done that the Council on Competitiveness, and I know that we had some folks here earlier, had supported, along with some of our university partners, as well as 4 major industrial manufacturing companies, to say that there is a problem in translating digital technologies to the supply chain, to the small and mid-sized companies. And so we had been building that as an independent, non-government funded program, and the timing was just perfect. And so thanks to the leadership of the AMNPO, because this is, it's been a great opportunity to take that to the next level, and be able to take kind of what we had done, we started working on as a pilot program, and be able to bring in not just 4 companies and 2 or 3 universities, but bring in 40 major technology and manufacturing companies, along with 24 universities, including 6 of the top 20 engineering schools in the U.S. And these groups are now having that dialogue on a regular basis, and using the platform that UI Labs provides to do so.
So in other words, it was her idea. Right there.
I'm Malte Ahrens with the World Bank. I was wondering if you could comment on the reasoning behind the access, size, scale, and focus of some of these manufacturing commons, and perhaps your vision for the future of them. Thank you.
I'll go for it.
Well, maybe I can touch a little bit on what we're trying to do as it relates to the manufacturing commons, and specifically for us, the digital manufacturing commons. Which is really a project that we intend to evolve over the 5 years or more that of our institute. This was an idea that there needed to be a platform for the dialogue to happen. Among the different members of the community. I'm going to start using that, Mike, by the way, the manufacturing community, because it's not just, you can't just think about it as a supply chain. And a place where there can be exchanges of ideas, so crowdsourcing design, for example, to also sharing data about designs and sharing data about existing machines and existing facility capabilities, for example. And I think that the idea of a commons, this type of platform that brings together kind of the range of skills that are necessary to be able to be competitive in a given industry. In this particular case for digital manufacturing, that means being able to collect and store data, and to do it securely, and to be able to put protections around it, and to be able to segregate it when necessary and integrate it when necessary. It means about bringing in the range of companies involved across the supply chain, including distribution and logistics, and quality assurance, end-of-life cycle management, all the way then to the early ends, the designers and early makers. And so we're creating an online platform that's leveraging a technology that has been utilized at GE internally with its supply chain, and making it open source as part of our institute's goals, so that there are over time, increasing number of process technologies and software capabilities that are really delivered virtually to our members, and at the same time that our members are virtually connected. So we'll be online before the end of the year, and the primary goal will be getting as many of the manufacturing technology companies in the U.S. to be on this common platform and working together.
Yeah, just to expand on that a little bit, I think that as far as the future, what does the future hold? One of the exciting things about the NNMI concept is that while early on we have the pioneer in the front row, and there's three more to join him on the bench here. America Makes here in the near future, but we don't have a true network up and running yet. But if you can fast forward to a few years from now, when there's substantially more of these national hubs within a network, tied together within a network, where they have enough autonomy where they can go about their missions, serving the customers that they have within their respective regions and in the greater manufacturing community, while being integrated within a network, having a true national network asset that has pulled from best practices around the world, that learn from each other. But if it's able to stay together, and if we are truly able to fully leverage that national network, that's really powerful, and it should be long-standing. The key will be to make sure that we institutionalize the necessary diversity. So what happens in those that are involved in organizational development would know this, even with the best intentions up front, sometimes you get the same people around the table and diversity sounds good, but ultimately it's not there. You end up serving the people that are around the table. So institutionalizing diversity, when I say diversity, it's diversity within the supply chain, it's diversity within size, it's diversity, really big D diversity, so make sure whether it's ethnicity and culturally, et cetera. I'm talking all types of diversity, education, all levels. If you're truly able to institutionalize diversity so the focus remains broad enough so you see everything, and so you can do what makes sense to drive the economy the way you should, that's really, really powerful. So I would say the jury's still out, but I think the focus is there, the intent is there, and the capabilities are there. And if we're able to deliver on its intent, I think they're going to be, again, around for quite a while, and I think that with an ability to continuously learn, it's going to be the U.S. will be a force to reckon with, and that's with one big building block in the foundation of manufacturing, potentially being these national hubs.
Carolyn, Mike, thank you very much for sharing your views. We wish you well, and we'll keep track of how things are going. Thank you very much.
Thank you.